I met Emily on a Tuesday afternoon in the kind of moment you don't realize is going to split your life in half. Before her, after her, she walked into my tire shop of flat, stressed, apologizing too much, brushing her hair back in that nervous way people do when they don't want to be an inconvenience. She smiled like she was relieved someone finally cared enough to help, even if it was just a tire. And I don't know what was about her that grabbed me first. The softness in her voice, the way she said thank you like no one had told her she deserved kindness. But something hooked me instantly. Back then, I thought it was love. Now I know better. Some things don't feel like warnings until they explode your entire life. The first time I met her family was at a barbecue at her parents' place. A small house, red chip paint, wind chimes on the front porch. Normal. Completely normal. Maybe that's why I didn't understand their looks at first. Her mom kept forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. Her dad shook my hand with one of those grips that tells you more than words would. And her sister, Megan, kept glancing at me like she wanted to pull me aside and whisper something, but didn't know whether it was her place. But Emily was happy that day. She held my arm like she had found something safe, something steady, something she wasn't used to, so I ignored the way her mom's face tightened every time Emily laughed too loudly. I ignored Megan, saying, not joking, just take things slow with her, okay? I ignored her dad muttering under his breath when Emily wasn't looking. I ignored everything except the way she looked at me like she wanted a future. People talk about red flags, but no one tells you how easy they are to overlook when you're holding them like flowers. There was one moment I keep replaying now. We were all sitting around a table. Her parents, her sister's husband, and a few cousins. Emily got up to refill her drink inside, and the second the door shut, the whole table fell quiet. Not slowly, not awkwardly, just instantly, like someone pressed mute. And her mother looked at me with this mixture of pity and warning and exhaustion, and she said, "You're a good man, aren't you?" I laughed because I didn't know what else to do, but she didn't laugh. No one did. Her dad let out a sigh that sounded like a door closing. Megan's eyes dropped to her plate. Someone's fork scraped too hard against porcelain, and I remember thinking this family had the strangest sense of humor. Then her mother leaned forward, placed her hand over mine, and said quietly, "Please, just keep your eyes open." Before I could ask what she meant, Emily walked back outside, smiling again, and the conversation snapped back to normal as if nothing had happened. I should have asked. I should have listened. But when you're in the early stages of love, you think warnings are judgments. You assume people can't see the person you see. I thought they were being unfair, overprotective, maybe even jealous of her happiness. If only I had understood they weren't jealous of her happiness. They were terrified of mine. Emily moved in 2 months later. Fast, I know, but it felt right. She made the house feel lived in. Her laugh in the morning, her hair on my pillow, her cooking filling the kitchen with smells I didn't realize I missed. But alongside all the warmth, the first cracks began to appear. Little things, smaller than small. A lie about where she'd been. A strange phone call she wouldn't answer in front of me. A name I didn't know was saved in her phone under a fake business. Then the tears afterward, the apologies, the promises that she didn't mean to hide anything. And every time she would wrap her arms around me and whisper that she was scared I would leave her. It felt genuine. It felt vulnerable. It felt like she was trusting me with a version of herself she didn't show others. But now I know that guilt can mimic vulnerability, and manipulation can feel like intimacy if you're not paying attention. Her family's behavior made more sense over time. Her mom called me to check how I was doing. Her dad dropped by the shop unexpectedly, pretending he needed an oil change, but asking question after question about Emily as if he was monitoring something. Megan texted me things Emily never knew about, stories of patterns Emily fell into when she got scared, mistakes she made, choices that weren't hers alone to make. But they never said the full truth. They danced around it, hinted, suggested. They wanted to protect me, but not betray her. And I was too stubborn, too in love, too stupid to push for clarity. The night everything turned dark, Emily came home shaking. Not crying, not panicked, shaking. She said someone had contacted her, someone from her past, and that she needed time to process what it meant. I didn't push. I didn't question. I didn't want to scare her. She went to bed early. I stayed up late watching TV, telling myself she just needed space. But at 3 in the morning, I woke to voices in the living room. Soft, urgent, not hers alone. A man's voice, low, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. When I walked out, the man stopped talking. Emily froze. Her eyes widened in that guilty way that tells you the truth before anyone says it aloud. He stood up slowly, like he was preparing for a story I wasn't supposed to hear yet. Emily opened her mouth, but nothing came out, just silence, suffocating silence. And in that moment, I felt every warning her family ever gave me crash into my chest at once. I didn't know then that this man wasn't just someone from her past. I didn't know yet that he was the reason her family feared for me. I didn't know that the truth about him, and about her, would destroy everything I thought I knew about the woman sleeping in my bed. The man, Jordan, looked at me the way someone looks at a dog that wanders somewhere dangerous. Not afraid, not guilty, just inconvenienced. Emily's hands trembled as she stepped between us, like she was shielding him from me instead of the other way around. That detail will stay with me forever. The way her body instinctively moved toward him, not away. The way her voice cracked as she whispered my name, not in fear of what I'd do, but fear of what I'd discover. In that moment, it felt like the entire room had tilted sideways as gravity shifted, and I was the only one who noticed. I asked who he was, not yelling, not accusing, just asking in the calmest voice I could manage, while every nerve inside me screamed. She didn't answer. Jordan did. I'm someone she should have told you about a long time ago. His tone wasn't threatening. It was worse. It was familiar, territorial, like he knew her in a way I didn't yet understand. Emily tried to interrupt, but he shook his head gently, almost pityingly, and said, "He deserves the truth." The truth. The truth comes in stages. First the shock, then the denial, then the slow, brutal acceptance. What I didn't know then was that I was still on stage one, and the next stages would break me in ways her family had tried so hard to prevent. Emily pulled me aside, her voice shaking as she said she needed to explain, but before she could speak, Jordan stepped closer and said, "He doesn't know about me, does he?" The words hit harder than any punch. Emily's silence confirmed everything, and I remember the first wave of pain wasn't anger, it was humiliation, the kind that wraps around your ribs and squeezes until you can't breathe. The kind that tells you the ground under your feet hasn't been ground for a long time. I asked him to leave. He didn't. He looked around my home like it was temporary, like he'd been here before, like he had been waiting to return. Emily told him to go, and only then did he nod, reluctantly, as if doing her a favor. But before he walked out the door, he looked at me and said, "Ask her about the timeline." Then he left. No drama, no shouting, just a quiet exit that felt like the edges of my life were tearing. Emily collapsed onto the couch, hands covering her face. I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to understand how I had walked so blindly into something her entire family saw coming. When she finally spoke, her words came out in fragments. Jordan was someone she'd been involved with before we met, but involved wasn't the right word. They had a relationship, a serious one that didn't end cleanly, one that her family never approved of, one that left scars she didn't talk about. But the timeline didn't make sense. She said they broke up months before she met me. That Jordan showing up was just bad timing. But lies always tremble. Words shake in a certain way when they're hiding something deeper. And everything inside me recognized that tremble. Over the next week, things spiraled. Emily became anxious, constantly checking her phone. Jordan kept calling, texting, and showing up at her workplace. Not to threaten her. No, that would have been too simple. But to talk, to reminisce, to pull on threads she had tried to weave into a new life with me. Every time I tried to help, she told me she needed to handle it. Every time I offered support, she told me I didn't understand. And every time I tried to distance myself, she clung to me, crying, apologizing, begging me not to give up on her. It felt like being pulled in opposite directions by two people who weren't even aware they were tearing me apart. Her family's warnings made clearer since the more I remembered them. The way her mother's eyes flickered with fear when Emily laughed too hard. The way her father watched her was like she were a fire that could go out of control at any moment. The way Megan's voice softened when she told me to take things slow. They weren't warning me about addiction or trauma or baggage. They were warning me about him, or maybe about the way she unraveled around him, the way she lost herself, the way she burned everything around her without realizing she was holding the match. The real crack appeared when her sister pulled me aside one evening. Megan had shown up unannounced, worried about Emily. She walked into our house like she had done it before, eyes scanning the room as if expecting something to be broken. When she saw Emily asleep on the couch, she motioned for me to step outside. And that's where she told me the truth, not the full truth, but enough to shift the ground under my feet again. She said Jordan had a hold on Emily that wasn't normal, a connection built on chaos and emotion and dependence, not love, a history involving disappearances, financial manipulation, broken trust, broken promises, and repeated cycles Emily hid from everyone. Her family spent years trying to pull her away, and every time they thought she was done with him, he would show up, and everything fell apart again. She said Emily didn't break away from him. She just transferred her emotional dependence onto me, and that scared them more than anything. I remember asking why no one told me any of this. Why did they let me walk into something blind? Megan looked at me with eyes full of guilt and said, because when someone's trapped in their own patterns, the truth doesn't save them. It just scares everyone else. After she left, I sat in the living room staring at Emily sleeping peacefully, unaware of the hurricane she had brought with her. And I wondered if love was supposed to feel this heavy, this confusing, this painful, or if I had mistaken chaos for intensity, passion for instability, devotion for rescue. The shift came a few days later when Emily received a letter. Not a text, not a call. A handwritten letter slipped under our door. I didn't read it. She hid it before I could. But whatever it said, it shattered her. She locked herself in the bathroom for nearly an hour. I heard sobbing, then silence, then the sound of her phone dialing someone Jordan, I assumed, before she came out, eyes red, saying she had to go handle something. She didn't say where. She didn't say when she'd be back. She just left. The door closed behind her, and her absence rang louder than any argument we ever had. I didn't know then that her disappearance that night would be the turning point. I didn't know that the truth she had been hiding was bigger than Jordan, bigger than her past, bigger than anything her family had tried to warn me about. But I would learn, and the truth would not just break me. It would follow me. She didn't come home that night. I stayed up waiting, pacing the living room, checking my phone every few minutes, even though it never lit up. At first, I told myself she just needed space. Maybe she was at her sister's. Maybe she was thinking. But when the clock hit 3 a.m. again, the same hour Jordan appeared in my living room a week earlier, my stomach twisted. Patterns repeat for a reason, even when you don't want to see them. By sunrise, I was calling everyone. Her phone rang twice and went to voicemail. Megan hadn't heard from her. Her mother's voice cracked when she asked, "Is she okay?" As if she already knew the answer was no. Her father didn't even pretend to hide his fear. There was no anger, no blame, just a quiet, hollow dread. And for the first time, I saw what it looked like to love someone who kept breaking you without meaning to. By noon, I drove to Jordan's apartment. I didn't want to. I didn't even know what I planned to say. But fear makes you desperate, and desperation makes you knock on doors you should stay far away from. When he opened the door, he didn't look surprised to see me. He looked tired, like he had been preparing for this moment too. I asked where she was. He ran a hand through his hair, stepped outside, and shut the door behind him so I couldn't see inside. That detail alone told me everything I didn't want to know. He said she came by the night before, upset, shaking, saying she needed answers. He said she left after an argument. He didn't know where she went after. And maybe it was the truth, or maybe it was a lie. With him, with her, with all of this, I no longer knew the difference. What he said next chilled me deeper than anything before. She's unraveling, he said. When Emily feels cornered, she runs. But she doesn't run towards safety. She runs toward whatever hurts most. I didn't understand then. I thought he meant she was reckless, emotional, unable to cope. But the truth was darker, much darker. When I got home, her family was waiting. Her mother was wiping tears in the passenger seat of their car. Her father was leaning against the hood, staring at the ground, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Megan pacing. They told me things they hadn't shared before, things they never wanted to say, but no longer had a choice. Emily had disappeared before, more than once. She had cycles, periods where she was fully present, loving, stable, and then periods where fear took over. Fear of abandonment, fear of being unlovable, fear of losing control. In those moments, she didn't just run, she self-destructed, not deliberately, but instinctively, emotionally, relationally. She clung to whoever made her feel alive in the moment and pushed away whoever made her feel exposed. It wasn't about Jordan, they said. It was about patterns. Patterns they tried to help her break. Patterns she hid behind apologies and tears. Patterns that made her unpredictable but also incredibly skilled at making you feel like you were the only one who could save her. And that's when I realized the truth her family had been trying to warn me about from the beginning. Emily didn't just hide things. She hid herself. The parts of her that were unstable. The parts she couldn't control. The parts that were shaped by old wounds she never healed. And maybe I could have understood that. Maybe even helped her if she had been honest. But secrets turn love into landmines. A day passed. Then two. No calls. No sightings. Nothing. On the third day, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a location pin. No text. No explanation. Just coordinates. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and drove. The location was an old riverside park, mostly abandoned, the kind of place teenagers used to hang out in the summers before it fell apart. Broken benches, dirt paths, tall grass. Quiet. Too quiet. Her car was parked crooked in the gravel lot. My stomach dropped. I ran toward it, shouting her name. The windows were fogged slightly from the cold. I opened the driver's side door, and she was there, curled up in the passenger seat, wrapped in her coat, eyes red, face pale. She wasn't harmed. She wasn't in danger. But she looked lost, completely lost. When she saw me, she didn't speak. She didn't apologize. She just broke. The tears she had been holding back cracked through her like floodwater. She kept saying she didn't mean to hurt me, that she didn't know how to explain, that she felt trapped between past and present. She admitted she had gone to Jordan's the night she left because she received a letter from him that brought old trauma rushing back. She didn't go there to rekindle anything. She said she went there because she was scared and didn't want to pull me into it. But it was too late. I was already drowning in it. What she finally confessed next gutted me. She said the timeline wasn't wrong. She had still been talking to Jordan when she met me. Not physically involved, but emotionally entangled, conflicted, not over him, not free from him, not ready for me. She said she wanted to be. She tried. But she didn't know how to end things with him cleanly because she was afraid of what he might do, or how he might react, or what it meant for her to finally let go. Her family didn't warn me because they didn't like me. They warned me because Emily wasn't just breaking patterns. She was repeating them. We sat there in the cold car for what felt like hours. I held her hand. She cried. I listened, and for a moment, for one tiny fragile heartbeat, I thought maybe we could rebuild. Maybe love could fix the fractures. Maybe this was the worst of it. But the universe doesn't give warnings for no reason. And the truth that came next was the one that destroyed everything. When Emily finally found her words again, her voice barely a whisper, she said there was one more thing she needed to tell me. Something she had been hiding since the beginning. Something her family knew but hoped she would reveal on her own. Something Jordan knew, but used as leverage. Before I met you, she said, staring at her hands, I made a mistake, a big one, and I was too afraid to tell you. My breath caught. She continued. I took a DNA test, she whispered, as a joke, but the results weren't funny. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. My life was split in half again that day. The wind outside the car felt colder than it should have. like the world was holding its breath as she forced the next words out. She said she didn't tell me because she thought it didn't matter anymore, because she thought she could run from it, because she hoped it would stay buried. But secrets don't stay buried. They wait, they rot, they poison everything around them until they finally claw their way to the surface. Emily tucked her knees up to her chest, eyes unfocused as she stared at the dashboard. "The DNA test," she whispered. "It matched me with someone I didn't know existed." Her breathing grew uneven. I thought maybe she meant a cousin or a half-sibling, something messy but explainable, something that hurt but didn't destroy. But the way she avoided my eyes, the way her voice cracked, it was worse, so much worse. She finally looked at me, tears streaking down her cheeks. "It matched me with Jordan." For a moment, the world didn't make sense. I couldn't understand the words, couldn't put them together, couldn't form a single thought. She rushed to explain, panicking at the look on my face. She said the test had suggested a close family match, something between a full sibling and parent-child. She didn't believe it at first. She thought it was a glitch, a mix-up, a bad joke. But the more she dug, the more the pain sharpened into truth. They weren't siblings. They shared a father. But Emily never grew up with him. Her family never talked about him. Her mother left after discovering the truth years ago, taking the children with her, refusing to let that secret infect their lives. But somewhere along the line, fate twisted in the cruelest way possible. Emily and Jordan, two strangers, had found each other without knowing the one thing that should have kept them apart. And before they ever knew the truth, they dated. I felt sick, nauseous, like the air in the car had turned thick and spoiled. Emily sobbed harder as she said she didn't find out until after they split the first time. That's why her family hated him. That's why they were terrified of the relationship. That's why they tried to pull her away without giving reasons she wasn't ready to hear. She said the moment she learned the truth, she ended things permanently. But trauma doesn't disappear just because the truth arrives. When Jordan found out, too, he spiraled, called her nonstop, showed up everywhere, not to rekindle the relationship, but because he couldn't process it. He didn't know how to exist with the knowledge that someone he once loved was connected to him in a way that made the entire relationship feel like a nightmare. And Emily, she didn't know how to breathe under the weight of it. When she met me, she was trying to escape, trying to start fresh, trying to build a life far from the shadow of that secret. But shadows follow, and secrets leak. And people like Jordan, people drowning in the same pain, don't let the past fade easily. That letter she received wasn't a love note. It was a test confirmation. A second test Jordan took to verify the first. A final proof. She hid it because she didn't want me to look at her differently. Didn't want me to see something broken or stained or shameful. She didn't choose any of it, but she carried the guilt as if she had. And now, sitting in that cold car with her trembling beside me, I realized she wasn't a villain. She wasn't malicious. She wasn't scheming. She was drowning in a secret that would break anyone. But understanding the truth doesn't erase the damage it caused. I felt the weight of everything. The warnings, the chaos, the emotional spirals, the fear in her family's eyes. They weren't protecting me from her. They were protecting her from pain resurfacing. They were protecting everyone involved from a trauma no one should ever have to bear. And I had walked straight into the middle of it, without a clue. Emily reached for my hand then, fingers shaking. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to look at me like She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. I could feel her far, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of being judged, the fear of being seen as broken beyond repair. I held her hand, but the truth sat heavy between us, thick and unmovable. There's secrets you can forgive. There are mistakes you can work through. But this wasn't a mistake. It was a tragedy written before either of them was born. I loved her. I still do. In some quiet corner of my heart that hasn't shut down yet. But love can't rewrite blood. Love can't erase the past. Love can't fix something that was never her fault, but still destroyed everything we were building. When we drove home that night, she fell asleep with her head against a window, exhausted, fragile, small. And I knew, without her saying a word, that this was the beginning of the end. Not because I didn't care, not because I was angry, but because some truths don't break relationships. They end them. Quietly, permanently, irreversibly. And that is why her family tried to warn me. And that is why I wish, more than anything, that I had listened.